What if the family who raised you spent years erasing your identity, only for you to uncover a truth even they feared? Claire Morgan Pierce returns to the heart of her family's power, only to face public humiliation, buried secrets, and a shocking revelation about her bloodline. As she unravels a web of lies reaching back decades, Claire must confront the people who betrayed her and a father she never knew existed. Stay tuned to witness a tale of betrayal, resilience, and one woman's fight to reclaim her rightful place. Chapter 1. The Invitation They Didn't Expect. Some ghosts arrive in envelopes. Claire Morgan Pierce stood frozen by the kitchen island of her Brooklyn apartment, an ivory envelope trembling slightly between her fingers. The embossed gold crest of the Morgan Family Foundation seemed to shimmer under the morning sunlight. For a long moment she simply stared at it, unable or unwilling to open it. The last time anything from the Morgan household had come her way, it had been a sterile legal notice. You are requested to vacate the premises within 30 days. That was 6 years ago, days after her father's funeral, when her stepmother Evelyn had officially closed the door, both figuratively and literally, on her place in the family. She traced the familiar, elegant script on the envelope, her name written in perfect cursive, Mrs. Claire Morgan Pierce. They knew she was married. That fact alone sent a prickle of unease crawling up her spine. "Claire?" Ethan's voice called from the bedroom. A moment later, her husband appeared, dressed in workout gear, coffee in hand. His gaze fell to the envelope she hadn't yet set down. "What's that?" "I'm not sure," Claire replied, her voice quieter than intended. She finally broke the seal and unfolded the contents. An invitation. The Morgan Family Foundation cordially invites you to the annual Boston Children's Hospital Benefit Gala. At the bottom, a handwritten note clipped to the cardstock. "Claire, it's been too long. We should reconnect. The family misses you. Evelyn." Claire let out a breath that bordered on a bitter laugh. The family misses her? The same family that had let her pack her belongings into a single suitcase and leave her childhood home without so much as a backward glance? The same family that had allowed Evelyn to strip away her father's legacy and reduce Claire to a footnote in his story? Ethan watched her carefully. "You okay?" She shook her head once, more bewildered than upset. "It's from Evelyn. An invitation to the hospital gala." "The gala?" Ethan set his coffee down, now fully alert. "That's interesting." Claire arched a brow. "Why?" Ethan hesitated a beat, then explained. "The Pierce Foundation is one of the anonymous primary sponsors this year. The foundation staff handled the details, but I've reviewed the sponsorship agreements. I had no idea Evelyn chaired the event committee." Claire processed this slowly. "So she invited me without knowing we're the ones bankrolling half her event?" "Apparently." A wry smile tugged at Ethan's mouth, which makes the timing of this invitation all the more suspicious. Claire paced the kitchen, heart pounding faster than she wanted to admit. Why now? Why reach out after all this time, and through a gala of all things? Her voice sharpened, the old anger bleeding through. "She doesn't miss me, Ethan. She never did." "I know." Ethan reached for her hand. His touch was steady, grounding. "But this could be an opportunity." Claire looked at him, incredulous. "An opportunity to what? Walk back into a room full of people who barely tolerated my existence when my father was alive and openly despised me after he died? An opportunity," he said softly, "to face them on your own terms. Not as the girl they pushed aside, but as the woman you've become. On equal footing or better." She swallowed. The idea unsettled her more than the invitation itself. A long pause hung between them. Claire's gaze drifted toward the framed photo on the wall, her and Ethan in Seattle on their wedding day, radiant, free, whole. The life they had built here in Brooklyn was far removed from the suffocating expectations of Boston's high society. She had thought she'd left that world behind for good, but part of her, a deep-rooted part, was curious. "Do you think she knows?" Claire asked, voice barely above a whisper. That you're married to me? Ethan smiled knowingly. Highly unlikely. We've kept your name in public records, and my staff maintained the donor anonymity per your request. Claire exhaled slowly. So they'll be expecting the same old Claire Morgan. They'll be wrong, Ethan said firmly. Very wrong. She let the thought settle, the edges of the invitation cool beneath her fingertips. Finally, she looked up and met Ethan's gaze with a resolve that surprised even her. Then we'll go, Claire said quietly. Not for Evelyn, not for them, for me. Ethan squeezed her hand. For you. Claire placed the invitation on the counter, her mind already spinning. The gala was in 3 weeks. She had 3 weeks to confront the shadows of her past and prove that they no longer defined her. The days that followed passed in a blur of emotions Claire couldn't fully name. Anger, anxiety, curiosity, and beneath it all, a tightly coiled thread of resolve. At the gallery, she found herself staring longer than usual at the bold lines and fractured forms in the abstract pieces. One sculpture in particular, a jagged bronze spiral with a hollow center, felt eerily familiar. She wondered if the artist had known what it was like to be hollowed out by grief and betrayal, to rebuild oneself piece by careful piece. Ethan, true to his nature, never once pressured her about attending the gala. Instead, he offered quiet support, handling the logistical details with his foundation team, subtly ensuring that Evelyn remained unaware of the Pierce Foundation's connection. One crisp Sunday morning, Claire joined him in the sun-dappled living room, a cup of Earl Grey warming her hands. Ethan sat on the couch, reading a news briefing on his tablet. I've decided on a dress, Claire said, breaking the comfortable silence. Ethan looked up, setting the tablet aside. Oh? She nodded. I spoke with Madison at Westfield. There's an emerging designer she represents, Leah Kim. Understated, but striking. I want something that speaks to who I am now, not who they remember. A smile touched Ethan's lips. Good choice. He studied her face, eyes gentle. How are you feeling? Claire exhaled. Some days, like I can walk in there with my head high. Other days, like I'll crumble the moment I see them. That's normal. He reached over, entwining his fingers with hers. Just remember, you're not walking in there alone. She squeezed his hand in return. I know, yet at night, in the quiet hours, doubts crept in. The memory of her father's funeral, Evelyn's carefully staged grief, Samantha's smug glances, her own numbness as relatives she'd known her whole life pretended not to see her, still haunted her. Would facing them now open wounds she'd worked so hard to heal? 3 days before the gala, Claire met Janet Morgan at a small cafe near the Boston Public Garden. It was the first time they'd spoken in person since her father's passing. Janet arrived promptly, her silver-streaked hair pinned neatly, eyes cautious but kind. After an awkward exchange of pleasantries, Janet leaned in. I heard you'll be attending the gala, she said softly. Claire sipped her tea. I am. Janet hesitated. Claire, I should have said this long ago. What Evelyn did, what we all allowed. It wasn't right. Claire met her gaze steadily. Thank you, Aunt Janet. I've spent years making peace with it. This gala, it's not about revenge. It's about closure. Janet's eyes glistened. You're stronger than any of us gave you credit for. They parted with a quiet understanding. Claire left the cafe feeling lighter, though a flicker of apprehension remained. The night before the gala, as snow flurried outside their Brooklyn brownstone, Claire stood before her bedroom mirror in her chosen gown. Midnight blue silk hugged her frame, the clean lines accentuating her poise. No frills, no apology. Ethan entered, gaze warming as he took her in. You look breathtaking. Claire turned, smoothing invisible wrinkles from the fabric. "Do you think I'm ready?" Ethan approached, resting his hands on her shoulders. "You've been ready for years. You just didn't know it." His words wrapped around her like a shield. Still, as they prepared for the drive to Boston the next morning, Claire's mind whirled. Memories, both bitter and bittersweet, jostled for space. What if they tried to tear her down again? What if she faltered? But then she remembered Ethan's steady presence, the life they'd built together, the woman she had become. This time, she wasn't the frightened girl desperate for belonging. She was Claire Morgan Pierce, with nothing to prove and nothing left to lose. The morning of the gala dawned clear and cold. As their car pulled away from the Brooklyn curb, Claire glanced out the window. The Manhattan skyline fading behind them. Ahead lay Boston, and the ghosts she was finally ready to face. And far across town, in a gilded Beacon Hill study, Evelyn Pierce tapped a manicured finger against a sponsorship report, her eyes narrowing at a line item she couldn't place. Anonymous primary donor, Pierce Foundation. Her lips thinned. "Pierce Foundation?" she murmured. "How? Do you think Claire is truly ready to face the family that once erased her? What surprises will the gala night bring? Stay tuned for the next chapter to find out." Chapter 2. The room she wasn't welcome in. Family, have learned, is not defined by blood, but by who holds the knife. The Rosewood Hotel gleamed beneath a crisp Boston winter sky, its grand facade decked in white lights and velvet red banners announcing the annual Boston Children's Hospital Benefit Gala. A valet in a black wool coat opened the door of the Pierce's sleek black town car. Claire Morgan Pierce stepped out slowly, taking in the familiar skyline. Boston. The city of her childhood, of her family's name, and of her exile. Ethan climbed out after her, adjusting the lapels of his tailored tuxedo. He looked at Claire, offering a hand. "You're sure about this?" Claire took his hand, fingers steady despite the chill in the air. "I'm sure." Her voice was calm, clearer than she had expected. Inside the grand lobby, crystal chandeliers caught the light, scattering it across marble floors and towering floral displays. The buzz of conversation floated in the air. Boston's elite gathering once again to see and be seen. Claire moved with measured grace, her midnight blue gown flowing like water. Each step felt weighted with memory. The last time she had entered a venue like this, she'd been the awkward young daughter of Richard Morgan, barely tolerated beside her father's glamorous new wife. Not tonight. At the check-in table, Claire offered her invitation. The young woman manning the tablet smiled warmly. "Good evening, Mrs. Pierce. Welcome." Claire inclined her head politely. Nearby, photographers captured guests against the Morgan Foundation backdrop. Claire avoided the cameras moving smoothly into the ballroom. The space glittered with excess golden candelabras, deep crimson drapes, tables gleaming with fine china and crystal. Old money met new, though the same faces dominated the room. Boston's dynasties, political figures, board members, society matriarchs. She had grown up among them. She had also been cast out by them. As she crossed the room, Claire caught sight of familiar figures. Patricia and William Morgan, her father's cousin and his wife, chatting near the silent auction. Brandon Morgan, ever loud and crass, already stationed by the bar with a group of laughing acquaintances. And there, near the center of the room, beneath the largest chandelier, stood Evelyn Pierce. Her stepmother wore an icy silver gown, diamonds at her throat, her smile as practiced as ever. At her side stood Samantha Pierce, in scarlet silk, phone in hand, eyes scanning the crowd. Claire's breath caught briefly. Time had barely touched them, except that the veneer of elegance now seemed thinner, more brittle. She forced herself forward. "Claire Morgan?" Claire turned to see Patricia approaching, surprise flickering across the older woman's features. "My goodness, we didn't expect you tonight." Claire offered a cool smile. Mrs. Pierce sent an invitation. Patricia's gaze flicked to Claire's gown, then softened with vague politeness. "Well, "It's good to see you." She made no move to linger. Claire watched her retreat, pulse steady, one encounter down, many more to go. She moved toward the silent auction, pretending interest in the art displays, ironically funded in part by the Pierce Foundation. Nearby, Janet Morgan appeared, eyes meeting Claire's with a small nod of encouragement. "Stay strong," Janet whispered as she passed. The words warmed Claire more than she cared to admit. And then, the room shifted. She felt it before she saw it. Evelyn had spotted her. The older woman's gaze landed on Claire, her smile freezing for a split second before smoothing into polite indifference. She leaned toward Samantha, murmured something. Samantha's eyes widened and her lips curled into a smirk. Claire held her ground, fingers brushing the satin clutch at her side. "You chose to come. Stand tall." Ethan would arrive later, per their plan. Until then, she would face this alone. From across the room, Brandon Morgan raised his glass mockingly in her direction. "Didn't think you'd have the guts to show," he called quietly to his companions. Claire ignored him. The hum of conversation dimmed as Evelyn moved toward the small stage. A hush spread as she ascended, microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," Evelyn's voice rang out, polished and poised. "Welcome to the annual Boston Children's Hospital Benefit Gala, hosted by the Morgan Family Foundation." A ripple of polite applause followed. Evelyn continued, her tone layered with the charm of practiced falsehood. "This year we are especially grateful to our generous anonymous benefactor, without whom tonight's event would not be possible." Claire's stomach flipped. The crowd murmured approval, unaware they applauded Pierce Foundation, Ethan's foundation. Evelyn smiled, gaze sweeping the room, lingering for the briefest second on Claire. "And of course," she added, "we welcome family and friends old and new, though some faces are more surprising than others." A few heads turned. Claire met Evelyn's eyes directly, calm, unflinching. "Let's begin," Claire thought. As Evelyn descended from the stage to warm applause, the room eased back into its rhythms. Waiters circulating with champagne flutes, guests returning to muted conversations. But Claire felt the undercurrent shifting. The game had begun. She caught Samantha's gaze from across the ballroom. The younger woman stood with one manicured hand on her hip, the other clutching her phone, already raised as if poised to document anything remotely unflattering. Claire exhaled slowly, willing her heart rate to steady. "Don't let them bait you," she reminded herself under her breath. But they would try. Barely a moment later, Brandon Morgan approached, with that familiar swagger Claire had loathed since childhood. His tuxedo fit a touch too tightly now, but the smirk was unchanged. "Well, well," Brandon drawled, swirling his whiskey. "Look who's decided to grace us with her presence." Claire met his gaze coolly. "Good evening, Brandon." He chuckled. "Didn't think you'd be brave enough to show your face after all these years." He leaned in conspiratorially. "Evelyn says you've done well for yourself. Little art gallery assistant or something like that." Claire refused to bite. "Assistant director," she corrected mildly, "at Westfield Gallery." Brandon's grin twitched. "Charming." He downed the rest of his drink. "But you know how these things go. Blood runs deep in this family. Outsiders never last long." Claire's fingers tightened slightly on her clutch. "I'm not an outsider. You all made me one." She forced a smile. "Enjoy your evening, Brandon." And with that, she turned and walked away, back straight, chin high. But the respite was short-lived. As she neared one of the sculpture displays, a familiar voice, sharp as a blade in velvet, sliced through the hum of conversation. "Claire, how delightful to see you here." Claire turned to face Evelyn, who now stood before her, Samantha gliding into place like a shadow. "Mrs. Pierce?" Claire said evenly. "Thank you for the invitation." Evelyn's smile didn't reach her eyes. It seemed only polite, Family should at least make appearances on such important occasions. Her gaze flicked over Claire's dress, the faintest arch of an eyebrow betraying her disapproval. "You do clean up nicely." Claire's voice remained steady. "I'm here to support the hospital, nothing more." "Oh, of course," Evelyn purred. Though one wonders what prompted this sudden display of family loyalty, Samantha chimed in sweetly, phone still poised. "Or perhaps a little curiosity? You've missed so many of our events." Her smile sharpened. "We'd hate for you to feel out of place." Claire held their gazes, unflinching. "I'm exactly where I need to be." For a beat, the three women stood locked in a quiet standoff amid the swirl of the gala. Evelyn's eyes glittered with something deeper now, not politeness, but calculation. "Well," Evelyn said at last, voice honeyed with false warmth, "do enjoy yourself, dear. Though some rooms," she added with a pointed glance, "remain reserved for those who've earned their place." Claire inclined her head. "Good evening." She turned deliberately, leaving them standing by the sculpture. Her pulse thundered in her ears, but her stride never faltered. At the far end of the ballroom, Janet emerged from a cluster of guests and caught Claire's eye. "They're watching you," Janet murmured as Claire approached. "I know." "You've rattled them already." Janet offered a faint smile. "Keep your footing." Claire nodded once. She was grateful for the support, but this was a battle she had to fight on her own. As the evening unfolded, Claire maintained her poise, navigating conversations with grace. But everywhere she turned, she felt the weight of eyes, the subtle press of judgment. Samantha's phone flashed, again and again, capturing angles, snippets, evidence for some game yet to be revealed. Claire's patience thinned, but she reminded herself, stay above it, stay the course. And then, near the dessert table, she overheard a voice. "Brandon's," low but carrying. "Wait until Mom's little show later tonight." Claire's breath caught. A show. The warning was clear. They weren't finished. She moved toward the edge of the ballroom, scanning the crowd, willing Ethan's arrival. "Not yet. Stay strong. You've faced worse." But as the hour ticked toward the main program, a coil of dread twisted deep inside her. They were planning something. And it would happen tonight. Chapter 3. The humiliation that backfired. Some stages are built not for celebration, but for crucifixion. Claire Morgan Pierce stood near the towering windows of the Rosewood Hotel ballroom, champagne flute untouched in her hand. The glittering skyline of Boston blinked beyond the glass, indifferent to the storm brewing within these gilded walls. She had heard Brandon's careless words, "Wait until Mom's little show later tonight," and now the air hummed with it, a subtle shift in energy. Smiles stretched tighter, glances more lingering. Across the room, Samantha and Evelyn whispered with an intensity that sent a chill down Claire's spine. Samantha's phone remained in her grip, her gaze flicking toward Claire every few seconds. Claire's throat tightened. They weren't finished. Not yet. She glanced at her watch. Ethan was due to arrive within 15 minutes. Could she hold the line until then? Janet drifted by, pausing just long enough to murmur, "Stay close to the edges. Something's coming." Claire nodded once, grateful for the quiet warning. A waiter passed. Claire declined the refill, her fingers tightening slightly on her clutch. Her mind raced, weighing options. Leave? No, that would hand them victory. Confront them? Not yet. Not without Ethan. She drew a slow breath, reminding herself of her purpose. This is about reclaiming my name, my place, not revenge, not weakness. But the knot in her stomach refused to loosen. A ripple of motion near the stage caught her eye. Evelyn was moving purposefully toward the band. Claire's pulse spiked. Evelyn leaned in, speaking softly to the band leader. He nodded, eyes flicking toward the mic. Claire swallowed hard. Around the ballroom, the conversation slowed as the band eased off mid-song. The lead musician's voice rang out. "Ladies and gentlemen, A brief announcement from our event chair, Mrs. Evelyn Pierce. A hush fell over the room. Claire's blood ran cold. Don't move. Don't show fear. Evelyn ascended the small stage once more, smile luminous beneath the spotlights. Samantha lingered at the stage's edge, phone discreetly raised. "Good evening again, everyone," Evelyn began, voice smooth as silk. "Before we proceed with dinner, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the incredible team who makes nights like this possible." Polite applause. Claire's fingers dug into the clutch. "Our event planners, our caterers, and of course, our wonderful serving staff." Another wave of applause. Claire's breath caught as Evelyn's gaze locked onto her. Serpentine, triumphant. "And," Evelyn continued, voice carrying just enough, "it seems we may have had a little mix-up this evening. One of our servers appears to have misplaced her uniform." A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. Claire's skin prickled. "Harper, excuse me." "Claire," Evelyn said sweetly, "I believe the staff entrance was through the service corridor." Laughter swelled louder this time, no longer uncomfortable, but eager, predatory. Claire's heart pounded in her chest. She stood frozen, caught in the spotlight of 100 eyes. Samantha's phone captured every second. Claire's mind screamed, "Stay still. Do not give them the show they want." But before she could gather a response, a dark-suited security guard began moving toward her from the ballroom entrance. Claire's breath shuddered. No, not like this, not again. Nearby, Brandon's voice called out cheerfully. Always trying to be something she's not. Some things never change. The guard approached gently but firmly. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." "I have an invitation," Claire managed, voice steady despite the tremor rising in her chest. Evelyn's voice dripped with false sympathy. "Of course you do, dear, but perhaps there was some confusion about your role this evening." More laughter, more phones raised. Claire's fingers shook as she reached for her invitation. Hold the line. Ethan is coming. But her mind raced with another truth. Evelyn was winning this moment, and unless something changed fast, Claire would be walked out in disgrace. Then, behind her, a shift, a movement near the ballroom doors. Claire's eyes flicked toward it. A tall figure had just entered, broad-shouldered, elegant in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. Ethan. Relief nearly buckled her knees, and as his gaze swept the room, landing on her, the security guard, and Evelyn poised above it all, Claire saw it, the storm in his eyes. For a heartbeat, the entire ballroom seemed to freeze. Ethan Pierce strode through the grand entrance of the Rosewood Hotel ballroom as if he owned it, broad-shouldered, poised, each step deliberate. The polished oak floor seemed to part for him. Conversations faltered, heads turned. Claire's breath hitched. He had come. And with that single fact, the tremor that had threatened to unravel her steadied. The security guard, still holding a tentative hand toward Claire, noticed the shift too. His eyes darted toward the approaching figure. "Harper!" Ethan's voice rang out, cutting through the tension like a blade. The crowd's collective gaze snapped between Claire, the guard, and this man whose arrival had so visibly shifted the room's energy. Claire turned toward him, voice trembling only slightly. "Eve." Ethan reached her side in 3 long strides. His presence was solid, anchoring. Without hesitation, he took Claire's hand, threading his fingers through hers. "What is going on here?" His voice was calm, but steel ran beneath each word. Before Claire could answer, Evelyn descended the stage, her smile firmly in place, though her eyes had lost their earlier gleam of triumph. "Mr. Pierce," she purred, "what an unexpected pleasure. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I'm Evelyn Pierce, chair of this evening's event." Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "Mrs. Pierce, I know exactly who you are." A beat of silence. A few murmurs rippled through the nearby guests. "I was under the impression this was a benefit gala," Ethan continued, "not a venue for publicly humiliating guests." Evelyn's smile strained. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Claire, well, she has not been an active member of the family for some time. There was confusion regarding her attendance." "That confusion," Ethan said flatly, "seems to have involved calling security to remove my wife from a room she has every right to be in." "Wife." The word rippled through the crowd like an electric current. Samantha's phone dropped slightly. Brendan's smirk disappeared. Patricia and William exchanged stunned glances. Evelyn blinked rapidly, composure slipping. "Your wife?" "We've been married for 2 years, Ethan confirmed. "And though Claire has had good reason to keep that information private, I see now why her instincts were correct." Claire's heart pounded, not from fear but from the sheer power of this moment. Ethan turned, his voice now pitched to Carrie. "For those unfamiliar, I'm Ethan Pierce, founder of Pierce Innovations and the Pierce Foundation." A collective gasp swept the room. "And," he added coolly, "Pierce Foundation happens to be the anonymous primary donor behind this evening's gala." Gasps turned to murmurs of shock. Claire watched Evelyn's face drain of color. Her lips parted soundlessly for a beat before she recovered enough to stammer. We are deeply grateful for your generosity, Mr. Pierce." "I'm certain," Ethan replied, gaze like ice. "But I find it curious that my wife, whose family name is on this foundation, was targeted tonight." Samantha, now visibly flustered, lowered her phone completely. Ethan continued, addressing the broader crowd. "Let me be clear. No guest at a charity event should be treated this way, least of all by their own relatives." Claire stood straighter, heat rising behind her eyes, not from humiliation but from fierce vindication. For years they had tried to erase her. Tonight, they had failed. "I think," Ethan said, voice softening slightly as he looked at Claire, "we'll stay for dinner. After all, my wife deserves to enjoy the event her family tried to deny her." A smattering of applause broke out, not from the core Morgan circle, but from hospital board members and other guests who now saw the situation clearly. Public opinion had turned. Claire squeezed Ethan's hand, her throat thick with unshed emotion. Evelyn stood frozen, smile brittle, a faint sheen of sweat at her brow. Samantha looked ready to bolt. Brandon retreated toward the bar. Claire met Evelyn's gaze one last time. For the first time ever, Evelyn looked away first. The moment hung suspended, victory quiet, but absolute. But as Claire and Ethan moved toward their table, now at the front of the room, Claire caught one more whispered fragment from Samantha to her mother. "We're not done yet." Claire's jaw tightened. Neither was she. Chapter 4. The tables turn. Sometimes, the sharpest cuts are delivered not in public, but behind closed doors. 10 minutes. That was all it took for the carefully polished veneer of the Morgan family to begin cracking. After Ethan's public defense of Claire and the revelation of Pierce Foundation's backing, the atmosphere in the ballroom had shifted palpably. Conversations became more subdued. Sidelong glances darted toward Evelyn and Samantha with increasing boldness. Claire sat beside Ethan at their table, ironically one of the most prominent spots near the stage. Her back straight, pulse still high. But beneath the adrenaline, something colder, steadier, had taken root. "You cannot be erased anymore." Across the room, Evelyn sat rigid at her designated table. Her smile was back, but it was brittle now, cracks barely concealed beneath flawless makeup. Samantha hovered close, voice urgent in her mother's ear. Claire watched them both, heart hardening. "They're plotting something," she murmured to Ethan. He nodded once. "Let them." Nearby, Janet Morgan approached their table, eyes shimmering with both pride and apology. "I should have spoken sooner," Janet said softly. "But tonight, you've shown them all who you really are." Claire smiled faintly. "Thank you, Aunt Janet, and this is just the beginning." Before Janet could reply, a suited man, a member of the hospital board, leaned in, voice pitched low. "We're calling an emergency meeting of the Gala committee. Now." Claire blinked. "Already?" The man glanced toward the head table. "Mrs. Pierce's conduct tonight was unacceptable. We can't risk further scandal with the hospital's name attached." His tone made it clear Pierce Foundation's influence had shifted more than just the public mood. As he moved away, Claire caught a glimpse of Evelyn, rising stiffly, following another board member toward a discreet side corridor. The wolves had turned. Ethan leaned toward her. "Do you want to go listen?" Claire considered it, then shook her head. "Not yet. If I walk in now, they'll accuse us of interference." She smiled thinly. "Let them turn on each other first." A waiter arrived with wine. Claire declined. The last thing she needed tonight was dulled senses. From the edge of her vision, she caught movement. Samantha, weaving through the crowd, phone in hand, eyes sharp. "She's looking for damage control," Ethan observed. "She won't find it," Claire replied. Sure enough, within minutes, hushed conversations began rippling outward. Board members whispered among themselves. Two older donors left their seats, pointedly avoiding Evelyn's table. By the time dinner was served, the undertone of the room was unmistakable. Power was shifting. Claire allowed herself a slow breath. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time in years, the balance no longer tilted entirely against her. At the far end of the ballroom, the side door opened. Evelyn emerged, face composed but eyes tight. She moved back to her seat, Samantha flanking her. Brandon, now visibly uncomfortable, muttered something under his breath. His earlier swagger had drained away. As the first course was cleared, Claire caught Janet's eye across the room. The older woman gave a single subtle nod. The vote had gone against Evelyn. Claire's fingers curled lightly around Ethan's. "It's happening," she whispered. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "It's well deserved." But as Claire glanced toward Evelyn's table, she saw it. Samantha's gaze. Sharp, calculating, no longer focused on the crowd, focused on Claire. And in that look, Claire read a single truth: they weren't finished. Not yet. For the remainder of dinner, the tension in the ballroom was almost physical. Conversations were quieter now, more measured, every guest acutely aware that something significant had shifted beneath the surface of the evening. At the head table, Evelyn sat like a porcelain doll about to crack, back rigid, eyes glittering with barely contained fury. The earlier confidence had drained from her posture, but it was Samantha that Claire watched most carefully. The younger woman's movements were deliberate, phone out once again, not recording now, but scrolling fast, typing furiously between glances at Claire's table. "They're trying to spin it," Ethan murmured beside her. Claire nodded. "Samantha's not going to let this die quietly." As if on cue, Samantha stood abruptly, weaving between guests toward the side exit. Claire's gaze followed her. "She's going to ground," Claire said softly, "probably pulling whatever strings she thinks are left." Janet, seated nearby, leaned in. "I overheard one of the board members. The vote wasn't close. Evelyn's out as Gala chair, effective immediately." Claire felt a pulse of vindication, 6 years of erasure. Tonight the tide had turned. But there was no time to savor it. Moments later, a soft chime rang from Claire's clutch. She opened it, heart thudding. An anonymous text. No name, just one line. "Better check your socials." Claire's stomach dropped. Ethan saw her expression. "What is it?" She handed him the phone. "Someone just sent this." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Samantha." Quickly, Claire pulled out her own phone, fingers moving fast. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and there it was. A series of carefully cropped clips. The earlier confrontation on the ballroom floor, but spliced to make Claire appear hysterical, desperate, clinging to a security guard. The captions were worse. Entitled "Stepdaughter crashes Gala she wasn't invited to." gold digger wife of anonymous donor causes scene. Claire's breath came shallow. Her hands trembled. Not with fear, but fury. She moved fast, Ethan said, voice low. But so did we. He pulled out his phone, already dialing. Who? Claire began. My PR team, Ethan said simply. They'll counter this before it spreads. Within minutes, 2 of Ethan's aides appeared discreetly in the ballroom, speaking softly into headsets. Claire watched, heart hammering as they moved, with practiced efficiency, identifying the key guests, neutralizing the narrative before it could take hold. Ethan glanced at her. It's handled, but Claire wasn't satisfied. She rose slowly from the table. Ethan moved to follow, but she shook her head. I need to do this. He hesitated, then nodded. Across the room, Samantha had returned, standing smugly near Evelyn, who now clung to her daughter's arm like a drowning woman. Claire approached them with calm precision, the crowd parting instinctively. The room quieted as whispers rippled outward. Nice edit, Claire said softly, gaze pinned on Samantha. But you missed the best part. Samantha's smile wavered. I don't know what you're talking about. Claire tilted her head. You will. She produced her own phone, speaking clearly enough for nearby guests to hear. Before tonight, I asked the Gala staff to discreetly record portions of the event for internal review and future transparency reports. Now Samantha's smile faltered completely. Claire's voice sharpened. I have the full footage, unedited, including the part where your mother tried to have me removed and you filmed it gleefully. Gasps spread through the nearby guests. Evelyn blanched. You wouldn't dare. Claire's gaze was ice. Try me. She turned deliberately, returning to her seat beside Ethan, head high, pulse steady. The damage was done. Samantha stood frozen, phone hanging uselessly in her hand. Evelyn's fingers gripped her arm in a bruising hold. Across the ballroom, Claire caught Janet's gaze once more. The tables had truly turned. But as Claire settled back beside Ethan, her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. You think tonight was the end? You have no idea what's buried beneath your father's name. Claire's blood ran cold. What secrets were still waiting in the shadows? What hidden truths about Claire's father are about to surface? And who sent the chilling message? Stay tuned for the next chapter to find out. The bloodline they hid. Some truths don't stay buried, they bleed through the cracks. The anonymous message burned on Claire's screen. You think tonight was the end? You have no idea what's buried beneath your father's name. Her fingers hovered over the reply button, then paused. No, don't engage. Watch. Wait. Ethan leaned closer, voice low. Another message? And this feels different. She set the phone face down. I need to know what they're trying to protect. Across the ballroom, Evelyn and Samantha sat stiff as statues, but their eyes weren't on the crowd anymore. They were on Claire. You're afraid now, Claire thought grimly. And you should be. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of polite applause and tasteless dessert. The gala's formal program limped to its conclusion, the board delivering careful, gracious remarks, but the air was tight, every guest aware they had witnessed more than just a charity event. By the time Claire and Ethan slipped away from the hotel, snow flurries dusted the streets. Their driver pulled away from the curb, the city lights blurring past. In the privacy of the car, Ethan turned to her. That message. Do you think it was from Samantha? Claire shook her head. It wasn't her style. Too controlled. Someone else is involved. Ethan's gaze sharpened. Then we find out who. They returned to their townhouse in Brooklyn near midnight. Claire barely removed her coat before moving to the study. She opened the small safe behind the bookshelf and retrieved an old, worn leather folder, Richard Morgan's personal estate files. She had requested them months ago from the family lawyer. after discovering that Evelyn had quietly sealed most of her father's private documents. The folder contained only a fraction of what she suspected existed. Tonight it was time to revisit every page. Ethan brought her tea, sitting beside her as she spread the documents across the desk. For an hour, Claire pored over the familiar files. Legal deeds, trust fund statements, dated correspondence, and then she noticed it. A slim, yellowed envelope wedged behind the folder's spine. No stamp, no postmark. Just her father's handwriting. For Claire. When you are ready. Her breath caught. Hands trembling slightly, Claire opened it. Inside were two things. A brief handwritten note, barely 3 sentences, and a folded photocopy of an old birth certificate. Claire's pulse thundered as she read the note. My darling Claire, if you ever find this, know that some truths were kept from you, not by choice, but by fear. I hope one day you'll understand why. Start with this. With shaking fingers, Claire unfolded the birth certificate and froze. Father's name, Richard Morgan. Mother's name, Catherine Blake Morgan. But beneath that, typed faintly, was a line she had never seen. Amended, biological father of record, Nathaniel Hale. Claire's breath left her in a rush. Nathaniel Hale? She stared at the document, heart racing. Claire. Ethan's voice was gentle. She looked up, eyes wide. My father wasn't my biological father. My father wasn't my biological father. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Claire stared at the fragile paper in her trembling hands, her pulse roaring in her ears. For so long, her identity had been shaped by the Morgan name, the family that had tried so hard to erase her from its ranks. And now, this single piece of paper was shattering the very foundation of her past. Ethan knelt beside her chair, his hand resting gently on her knee. Claire, he said softly, look at me. She raised her eyes to his, vision blurring. Who is Nathaniel Hale? He asked. Claire swallowed hard. I don't know. I've never heard the name before. Her voice broke. Why would he be listed as my biological father? Why would my father Richard hide this? Ethan's gaze was steady. There's only one way to find out. Carefully, he lifted the fragile document from her fingers and studied it. The amendment is dated 16 years ago, he said, brow furrowing. You would have been... What? Claire nodded slowly. That was around the time Evelyn married my father. Realization dawned, sharp and cold. Did Evelyn know? Is that why she pushed so hard to erase me, to control the narrative before I ever discovered the truth? Claire stood abruptly, pacing the room. Her mind raced, threads of the past suddenly twisting into new, sinister patterns. All this time, she whispered, they made me believe I didn't belong, maybe because legally, I don't. She stopped, fists clenched, but that was never my choice. Ethan rose, calm but firm. Claire, this changes nothing about who you are. It only changes what they tried to hide. He touched her arm. And we are going to find out everything. She drew a shaky breath, grounding herself in his steady presence. First, Ethan continued, we start with Hale. If he's alive, if we can find him, he may have answers. Claire nodded, determination crystallizing. I want to know, all of it. Without hesitation, Ethan retrieved his laptop. I'll start digging. If this man left a paper trail, we'll find it. As he typed, Claire opened her phone once more. The anonymous message glared back at her. You think tonight was the end? You have no idea what's buried beneath your father's name. Her fingers hovered. This wasn't just about public humiliation anymore. This was about blood, legacy, and someone out there knew more than they were saying. As Ethan worked, Claire sifted through the remaining documents in the folder. Beneath old tax statements and faded family photos, another envelope surfaced. Unmarked this time. Inside, a single aged photograph. It showed a young woman, Her mother, Catherine, smiling beside a tall man with striking features, dark hair, piercing gray eyes. On the back, in her father's handwriting, Nathaniel Hale, 1985. Claire's breath caught. The man looked hauntingly familiar, his eyes a mirror of her own. Her phone buzzed again, another anonymous message. If you want real answers, look beneath the old estate. Some things your stepmother never wanted you to see. Claire's pulse spiked. She turned to Ethan. They're pointing me to the old house. His expression darkened. Then that's where we go next. What secrets lie beneath the old Morgan estate, and why did Evelyn try so hard to keep them buried? Stay tuned for the next chapter to find out. Chapter 6. The Name That Was Erased. Sometimes you must walk back through the shadows to find the light. Claire stood beneath the gray sky of early morning, staring up at the imposing silhouette of the old Morgan estate. It hadn't changed. Not the wrought iron gate, not the ivy-cloaked brick, not the shuttered windows that had once held her childhood in their gaze. But Claire had changed. Now she wasn't a frightened girl being pushed out in silence. She was here by choice, armed with the truth and the will to uncover the rest. Beside her, Ethan studied the house carefully. His usual calm was edged with quiet tension. "You sure about this?" he asked. Claire drew a breath. "I have to know." She glanced at the latest anonymous message, still glowing on her phone. "Look beneath the old estate. Some things your stepmother never wanted you to see." Claire pocketed the phone. "We'll start with the basement." The front door was no obstacle. Ethan had arranged temporary legal access after last night's revelations. Evelyn's ownership of the house was already being contested thanks to her ousting from the Gala and the board's swift motion to freeze questionable assets. Still, the place felt hostile as Claire crossed the threshold, every floorboard groaning beneath her feet like an old ghost. Each step through the grand foyer triggered memories, her father's laughter echoing down the staircase, Evelyn's sharp voice calling her an ungrateful child, Madison's mocking smirks in the parlor. But Claire kept moving, toward the basement door. It had always been off limits. Storage, Evelyn had said, lips thin. Nothing down there but dust and old junk. Now, Claire pressed her palm against the worn wood, heart hammering. Ethan squeezed her shoulder gently. "I'm right here." She opened the door. A faint scent of mildew drifted up. The stairs descended into shadow. Claire flicked on her phone's flashlight, illuminating each creaking step. The air grew colder, heavier. At the bottom, they found a cramped, cluttered room lined with ancient shelves, rusted tools, boxes of discarded linens, and in one corner, a battered filing cabinet. Claire's pulse quickened. She crossed the floor and tugged at the drawer, locked. Without a word, Ethan produced a slim tool from his pocket and worked the mechanism. A soft click. The drawer slid open. Inside, folders stamped with Richard Morgan's personal archives, many labeled in her father's distinct hand. Claire flipped through feverishly, and then she saw it. A folder marked Nathaniel Hale, Correspondence and Records. Her fingers trembled as she drew it out. Inside, letters. Legal papers. A faded photo of Nathaniel, older but unmistakably the same man from the earlier photograph, and a document that made her breath catch. DNA test results. Subject A, Claire Morgan. Subject B, Nathaniel Hale. Result, 99.9% match. Biological paternity confirmed. Claire staggered back a step. It's true. Her real father was Nathaniel Hale, but one letter caught her eye, written in a crisp, unfamiliar hand. To Evelyn Morgan. Per our agreement, the matter of Claire's paternity remains sealed. Any breach will void the trust arrangements. Destroy this after review. Claire's blood ran cold. They had known. Evelyn had known all along, and she had buried the truth to protect her grip on the Morgan fortune. Claire's phone buzzed. Another anonymous message. Now you know, but this isn't over. There's one more name you need to see. She turned to Ethan, eyes blazing. We're going to find it. By the time the sun rose over Manhattan, Claire had barely slept. The evidence from the basement still lay spread across the study table. Letters, documents, the damning DNA results. At dawn, Ethan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. We need to move fast, he said, before Evelyn tries to bury this again. Claire nodded. Joss said, we go public today. Ethan was already on the phone with his legal team, coordinating next steps. But Claire knew there was one more place where this truth needed to land first. The Morgan Foundation Board. By noon, a special emergency session had been called, by request of multiple board members still reeling from the fallout of the Gala. Officially, the meeting was to review recent events and leadership suitability. Unofficially, everyone knew it was Judgment Day for Evelyn Morgan. Claire and Ethan arrived at the Foundation's downtown Boston headquarters under discreet security escort. Word had spread. Several board members greeted Claire with respectful nods. Evelyn was already seated at the long mahogany table when Claire entered. Samantha stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes glinting with hostility. Claire met Evelyn's gaze squarely, and for the first time did not look away. The board chair opened the session with a dry throat. Mrs. Morgan, before we proceed, Miss Claire Morgan Pierce has requested to present new evidence relevant to tonight's discussion. Evelyn's face paled. I object. The chair cut her off. Objection noted. Proceed, Mrs. Pierce. Claire rose slowly, her hands steady now as she faced the room. For years, she began, voice clear, I was told I did not belong to this family. I was treated as an inconvenience, erased from the very legacy my father built. She held up the DNA report. Here is proof that Evelyn Morgan knowingly concealed the truth of my parentage, colluding to suppress my legal rights. Gasps echoed through the room. Claire continued. This letter, she held up the damning correspondence, shows she made a private agreement to seal this information for personal gain. Evelyn stood abruptly. This is an outrageous fabrication. But Claire was ready. Is it? She asked softly, clicking a remote. On the screen behind her appeared a scan of the full letter, signed by Evelyn Morgan. The board members leaned forward, shocked. Samantha whispered fiercely to her mother. Evelyn's face crumpled. For a moment, she swayed as though struck. The board chair cleared his throat, voice grim. Mrs. Morgan, do you deny this document is authentic? Silence. Then, barely audible, no. A tidal wave of murmurs swept the room. Claire's voice did. My father may not have been my biological parent, but he chose to raise me. That choice was stolen by lies and greed. Today, I reclaim both my name and my rightful place. The board chair straightened. Effective immediately, Mrs. Morgan is suspended from all leadership roles pending legal review. Claire exhaled, feeling a weight lift, but as she gathered her documents, one final message buzzed on her phone. You've exposed the first truth. Now are you ready for the next? Nathaniel Hale is looking for you. Claire's breath caught. The story wasn't over yet. Thank you for watching Claire's Story, a journey of loss, truth, and resilience. Family isn't always defined by blood or legacy, but by the courage to stand for your worth. If you've ever faced betrayal or felt erased by those closest to you, remember, your voice matters, your story matters. We hope Claire's fight inspires you to reclaim your own power. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more powerful tales of justice, identity, and healing. Until next time, stay strong and stay true.